Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.
Hello, how are you? I hope you are fine, excited. After, 8 or 9 days of COP29, we are discussing here the NCQG at the COP29, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of Klima-Allianz Germany, organizing this event on making NCQG fit for purpose. And before we have an interesting discussion, also by involving you people, I would like to welcome Lisa Badum. She is the member of the Committee for International Climate and Energy Policy in the German Parliament, and she is a member of Parliament of the Green Party. So welcome, Lisa Badum.
Thank you so much, Christiane. Dear fellow activists for climate justice, dear colleagues, thank you so much for being here. I'm really looking forward to this panel, and there are a lot of German NGOs here to discuss the new NCQG, which obviously is the most important question at COP. But let me start with another topic connected to this COP. How can democratic governments be prepared for climate justice, and how can they involve the population for public finance, for climate finance? We need a strong mandate from our citizens in all those countries which are at COP here. But of course, we're mostly connected with democratic countries, with democratic allies. How can we get support from our voters for climate action and for climate finance? In Germany, we're heading to re-elections. We have snap elections at the end of February. And I think we all followed up the elections in the US, which are obviously a big topic here. And we don't have the final analysis of how, the elections in the US went, how it went. And of course, it's another society than German society or other democratic societies are. But for me, just a few learnings I drew personally from the elections in the US. First of all, unfortunately, I think it's not enough to have it as an agenda for an election campaign to fight for the existence of our democracy, which is sad, because obviously it's the most important thing. And a lot of democracies in all the US, and also we see it also in Europe, democracies are threatened, are in danger because of these information campaigns, because of populists trying to divide our countries. But we see that as an argument, as agenda setting, it's not enough to bring voters to the election offices. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Secondly, climate action was not at all a topic in the US elections. Of course, there were we know that the agenda setting is not just done by the candidates and by parties, but I think it was sad that also the Democratic Party didn't bring up this topic of climate action, of climate justice, although we saw extreme weather events in the US during the whole election campaign. And I think this was a fault. I think we should talk about climate. We should talk also about economic growth and how economic growth is connected to green and to affordable energy. But we should also use the word because it's not just about, you all know this, saving the planet, but saving ourselves. So it should always be an essential element of every election campaign. And thirdly, we see that people are really concerned about inflation, as I said, affordable housing, renting, affordable energy, taxation. So we also have to bring this topic within election campaigns, and we have to connect it with climate justice. So just let me tell one tiny example. We are discussing, in the Green Party, we are discussing the whole narrative or topic of polluters pay. So how can we get the big oil and gas companies to pay more, to pay their real fair share? Because what we saw in the energy crisis, especially in Europe, but all over the world, is that the gas and oil companies had more profits than ever. And they kept those profits within their pockets. It was not distributed, of course, to the citizens anywhere. And I think we should tackle this problem. So I welcome the proposal of the Brazilian government for a new super rich taxation worldwide. This is also a discussion we should have. We know it's not the super rich tax or the polluters pay tax. It's not something we can achieve in just one day or with one government. But we have to have this discussion to remind them of their responsibility, because so far those companies are continuing getting profits and making us all miserable. With those profits they are gaining. And I think they should pay their fair share in our budgets, in the budgets of governments, also in climate finance, if you will. So to come to a conclusion, I think this is not just true for the German election campaign, but for all democratic governments which try to bring voters to the conclusion that you have to save both the democracy and the climate. We have to connect those three topics. So talk about bread and butter topics, about daily life. Daily life has to be affordable, but connected with green, renewable energy, and connect the whole topic of economic inequality with the share between the fossil companies and the other companies and the population we see. I think this is a really important task, because all the funding for climate finance cannot be done if we have the populists running around and telling people it's not for your own sake. If we have climate partnership, climate cooperation, climate finance, development finance, but you know, it's not good for you if a country cooperates. But the opposite is true. Especially Germany is a country that needs to cooperate with countries all over the world. This is our DNA. We are partners, of course, in economic affairs, but also in all the other diplomatic areas. We want to build trust with our partners, and all those, as I said, populists who are trying to take that away from us, we will fight this. At least I can say this for the Green Party, and I think for all the progressive parties in this election campaigns. So let us really focus to convince our voters that in the end we can have even more successful COPs in the future. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you so much. By the way, my name is Christiane Averbeck, and I'm the head of Klima-Allianz Germany. And it might be that you don't know us. Klima-Allianz Germany is a member organization of 153 non-governmental organizations of Germany. They are environment, development organizations, churches, trade unions, and all of them. They are into ambitious climate tasks, and therefore we lobby government in doing more. And therefore we are very happy to have today Heike Henn, a member of the German government, the Director for Climate, Energy and Environment of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, with us, who will please come maybe you can sit here. Oh, yep, there. Okay. And I hope that, you know, she can also talk on behalf of the foreign ministry. Okay. Yeah, we heard at least that she is trying hard to answer all the questions that we have concerning the government involvement in the NCQG negotiations. And then I'm very happy to have Harjeet Singh on the panel today. He's global engagement. He's the director of fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. Please have a seat. You see that after I will have a seat there, there will be one chair empty. And the idea is that today we have a discussion, a lively discussion, and everybody who's interested in getting involved has the opportunity to come in front, sit there on the chair, and ask questions or also make statements. And we hope that it will be a lively discussion, not so much only. Okay. Yes, we will have a lively discussions. So we thought that at the beginning I will ask Heike, Henn and Harjeet a little bit certain questions, and then I hope, through you we will have some insights into what you also other people here on the COP think on the NCQG. So, Heike, Henn, where are we at the negotiations right now? And what do you think? What are the biggest stumbling blocks? And according to you, what are the landing zones?
Yeah, thank you very much. You will not be surprised that I will not spoil all the beans on this stage. I don't think that we would get to a solution much faster, but definitely we from the German government and also from the European member states and the Commission want to contribute really to a good outcome, to find really compromise. I would say compromise is not enough, really a good ambitious and realistic NCQG. So, and I think what is happening right now is everybody behind the scenes working very hard. It's good that the ministerial consultations have started, and the presidency is a bit turning up the speed in the whole process, because we are already on Tuesday. From the latest what I heard is that the stock take in the plenary will now happen tomorrow morning instead of this evening. That speaks a bit to how intense the process is and how much we are a bit running against time, but still working towards a good outcome. So the key elements that everybody is talking about are, of course, those three that the presidency also put in front of the consultations. That's the quantum, the structure, and the contributor base of the goal. No surprises here. And I think if what I look at from the different perspective, all of us know the urgency, and that for all kind of reasons, for climate, for politics, for what is the signal coming out of Baku, we should really seek to find common ground. And starting with the contributor base, I think there is quite an agreement that the developed countries still lead in providing finance. And I see also emerging consensus that what was true in 1992, that it is about emissions and economic capacity, this is still true, but it might now speak to a different set of countries. Then on the structure of the goal, I think we all agree that there needs to be a public core, public budgets, MDBs. And then there's a bit who else is public, part of the core, and what about the private sector? And I have the impression that so far we didn't do a good job from the EU, from the developed countries, to explain why we see private sector also important and not a distraction from the core of the public financing. So we have to do a better job in that respect. And just my last remark on the quantum, there's the buzz about the number, and I can assure you that everybody is thinking about a number, making calculations, thinking about the MDB number, so on and so forth. But it's really not knowing who will pay what counts for the quantum. It's difficult to come out with a number first. So this is really a challenge we have right now. We will see if the presidency comes up with a text and in the late hours of Wednesday with a number, and then we can really talk again. But finance is not everything, and finance is not, dollars are not automatically impact towards 1.5. So what is really important that we jointly create a system that enables us to deliver on impact and accountability. Thank you.
I'm sure impact and accountability is something that resonates, Harjeet. But what is your take? I think it's working. It should work.
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. And why do we need a strong NCQG, a strong agreement?
Well, I don't think anybody needs to be convinced that why we need money, and because we already see that we are not on track when it comes to emission reduction or moving away from fossil fuels. Our emissions are rising. Clearly, that came out in the UNEP emissions gap report. We are nowhere near the target of achieving money that is needed to help people adapt. Again, UNEP adaptation gap report talked about what we have is barely nothing compared to what we need, between 215 to more than $300 billion. So that's a huge scale. And on loss and damage, we are already seeing so many impacts. And when we talk about NCQG, we are talking about covering all the 3 pillars of climate action. And without that, NCQG will not be achieving its mandate. I know there are discussions on whether loss and damage is part of it or not. We strongly believe that loss and damage is very much part of it. And if we have to protect vulnerable communities, then it becomes absolutely fundamental to make sure that money for addressing loss and damage is made available. And the scale that we are looking at, and these are several reports indicating it's close to $400 billion on an average annually. So if that's the scale, we definitely need to make sure that there is a sustained and predictable flow of income. And one more thing that I would like to add to what Heike said, apart from some of those issues, and I'm sure we'll get into further details, is the quality of money. And in that quality, when we see only loans coming in, which are going to make people far more miserable because they're already in debt, and I'm talking about both communities and countries, and if the quality is not ensured, which means they have to be predominantly grants for adaptation and loss and damage, and even mitigation. And I think that conversation we have been pushing for a very long time. Even mitigation requires grants, because in several countries you cannot do mitigation activities unless you have a basic funding for infrastructure, for human resource development or policies and so on. So apart from those issues, I'm adding quality, which is going to be an important aspect of the new collective quantified goal.
So are you happy with what the government of Germany is contributing?
Not at all. Of course, we need more. No doubt Germany is doing better than many other developed countries, and my argument has always been that Germany should push other developed countries, and I don't think other countries are doing well enough, and that's where we need to scale up. And then, of course, on quantum, we would like Germany to champion the quantum that we are looking at. You can see we are looking at $5 trillion annually, and that's the reality. I mean, it's not just as civil society we are putting forward a random number. These are the needs assessment that have been done by several studies. So we need to talk about trillions, and where we always even challenge the German government is, yes, private sector has a role to play, but we see that we are depending too much on private sector, and as Heike already said, they've not delivered. And I must share a number here. The share of private sector finance on adaptation is barely 2%. So, and we even talk about private sector for loss and damage. So we know private sector is not delivering. They definitely have a role in mitigation. Even there, you need to put public finance to leverage the potential of private finance.
Yeah, Heike, Henn, how do you want to make sure that we get the private finance?
Yeah, that's an excellent and challenging question, because I agree that we so much jointly were not really successful. I think the quality is a good point from what Harjeet already mentioned, but also quality for me means also that in country and also in development contributor partners, that we do everything that's possible to make really the finance effective. And that means, for example, that you need energy system planning and the right regulations to give really incentives to investors. If I don't know that the solar plant that I'm investing in will really get on the grid, then my risk is just too high and I don't build a solar plant. So I think from Germany we know that this policy making for the just transition is a difficult one. And Lisa Badum spoke to how we really have to get everybody on board and understand what you are up to. So policy making has its challenges. But if you get it right, then you really move private sector in the right direction. And not only for decarbonizing or for energy access from renewables, but also for the just part of the transition. I mean, this is what governments can do, and what I think developing countries should even be more ambitious on to make progress.
Yeah?
Well, what you are saying is definitely needed as a good policy framework for countries to govern and also countries to attract investment or even put their own money. But when you look around, and even large countries, they've not been able to attract a lot of private finance despite having very good so-called enabling environment. And I can take the case of India, and I always bring in 87% of green finance in India is domestic. Now, I don't think anybody can say that India does not have an enabling environment. We have good human resource capacity. Our policies are very investment friendly. Yes, there are infrastructural challenges, but those are being tackled. Technologically, we are not too far behind. So why India is not able to attract investment? And I know India and Germany have good relationship, but still, we don't see a lot of investment coming in. And in case of India, I'm not even saying grants, I'm saying investment. So and imagine if India is finding it challenging, think about Malawi's and Malaysia's and Indonesia's of the world, where they still have to work on many of these things that Heike is saying. So, and it also underlines the point that I made earlier. When governments do not have that policy framework, they do not have right kind of human resource which requires capacity building, that cannot happen through private sector. No private company is going to invest massively into capacity building of human resource in a country. They would like something which is ready that they can take and build on. And that's why you need public finance. And that's exactly the argument we have been making. And if you look at the breakup that we have put forward as civil society, we are saying $300 billion as grants for mitigation, 300 for adaptation, and 400 for loss and damage. So we are saying $300 billion for mitigation. We are not saying 3 trillions. Because we know that 3 trillions are going to arrive if you put $300 billion properly as grants to help countries to do exactly what Heike is saying. And I can't imagine Malawis and Ethiopias and Nepals will be able to do it on their own. And second, it's not just about enabling environment for private investments. We need to start treating climate action as a public good. And if we really do it that way, then we should enable these countries to do home production. Domestic capacity should be built. We can't just expect them to import things and make their policies and policy frameworks such that only private companies from outside are actually going to make money. So how much are we investing in building the capacity of those countries to do production locally?
Now, I would like to ask Heike Henn on the 5 trillion. That's quite a high amount. What is your take on that? And after that, I would like to open the floor and would invite interested persons to come up here in front, to sit here, to give a question or a statement. And then I hope that you can answer the questions. That would be nice if we have a lively discussion then with the person who's coming here to us.
Yeah, it's a very high number. I would tend to agree. And I think what had more traction in the negotiations and also in the halls of this COP was the latest also summary and update from the high-level expert group looking into what is needed from finance. I mean, the question is, what do you count, what you are not counting, how you are structuring it. So the result of the high-level expert group was a bit easier to digest, I must admit. Still talking about, I mean, 2.4 trillion overall.
Can I add one important element before you open? We have still not costed the cost of just transition. A coal miner cannot become a solar engineer in her or his lifetime. I can talk about, again, India, and I'm sure that's true for Indonesia, that's true for Malaysia. Within my own country, there are states that are having coal mines, which are going to be shut down. And there are states which are already leading on solar power. Now, those states which only have coal as a major source have to diversify their economy. They are going to be losing revenues. There has to be a plan to help those states. And you zoom out, think same about Nigeria, about Colombia. Those economies need to diversify. Mitigation doesn't cover that aspect. Who is going to help those countries to prepare that economic diversification plan, reskilling of workers, create new green jobs? That's not mitigation. The mitigation definition doesn't cover that. And we are not even talking about it enough. And we cannot allow that social or economic disruption to happen by leaving those countries on their own. We say, you just stop producing coal. And imagine Colombia, which has already shown that political leadership and is very much part of the initiative that we are leading, which is Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative. It's asking exactly that question. I am ready to make a shift. I am ready to let go my revenues, but I let go my export of coal. But what will replace that? Help me. And this system is not able to help countries like Colombia. So where are the answers? And where is that money? So we need to have a very nuanced discussion on helping those countries as well.
Just quick answer, please.
It's important. It's already part of the discussion. I mean, Colombia presented here again, like in Cali, their approach, and we have to mobilize the support. That includes also, and Colombia is highlighting that, domestic resources. And I just want to highlight, we need a nuanced discussion on everything. So the capital flight out of Africa is much higher as the whole ODA, including climate finance, coming into Africa. So it's really a nuanced discussion on a couple of levels.
Now, I would like to invite Sabine Minninger. I know that she has to leave soon, so therefore I would like to invite you first. Please introduce yourself and what is your take and what is your question?
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Sabine Minninger. I'm a senior policy advisor on climate change with the German development organization called Bread for the World. And we are working in close partnership with Harjeet. We are also a very good exchange always with Heike Henn from BMZ. So, and I'm really looking forward to continue this dialogue that we have established a long time ago. What I'm worried about is how adaptation and loss and damage is discussed here, and I'm also backing the call from the Global South to get a sub-goal on mitigation, on adaptation, and also on loss and damage, of course also on mitigation. But I really like to take now on the resilience finance that is desperately needed. We see that I'm afraid that it's a bit sidelined here and not well understood among all negotiators from the Global North. And I see that the BMZ can play there a very good bridge builder to explain that loans will not function for adaptation, loss and damage. It will only lead to a further indebtedness of the poorest countries in the climate crisis. So they really need grants to move forward, to rebuild once something is destroyed. And also, to be fair, it is according to the polluter pays principle. From our German understanding, if you are causing a car crash, of course, and it's your fault, then you have to pay for the damage. Or your insurance is covering and you pay for that. So this understanding that you're destroying the atmosphere and now the poor countries, they have to beg for charity is something that we cannot allow, and it's not acceptable. Now my question. The loss and damage fund is there. It's created. Germany made the first payment, and it helped that also other countries moved in, stepped up, and paid also into the loss and damage fund. But in general, the all over is now 700 million US dollar. The needs are around 400 to 800 billion US dollar a year. So how to fill the fund? How can that happen? I wish that at the end we go out of here and you called for one innovative finance source that is dedicated for the fund to fill it. For example, a levy on private jets, or a levy on a business flights or first-class flights. Shipping and emission is not taxed so far. The big polluters are even not on our payroll now. We saw a ray of light coming last night from the G20 process in Brazil. At least in Germany was part of it. There's now an understanding that they would like to tax super rich, or let's say they go on a working program, they have an understanding that they would like to work on this. So this is something what we need at the end, to know that no one will be left behind. I know that sentence is used a lot, but it has a meaning in this process here. And that is my question: which innovative finance sources from all the high-hanging fruits do you think is the lowest hanging fruit that could be used to fill the fund?
All those easy questions. Thank you, Sabine. Okay, I mean, our government situation is in a way that I speak as Heike Henn here. Knowing, although, that, for example, my minister very early on, Svenja Schulze, argued for taxing the super rich. So this G20, together with ministers from South Africa and Brazil, early on. So. But apart from that, I personally think that we cannot do without innovative sources. May it be shipping, may it be air tax. I think also coming again back to the very important points that Lisa Badum raised. I think everything that is linked to the use of fossil fuels, be it in the plane or so, and takes care that not like the normal person feels they only have to pay, but be it the super rich or business class, or so there is a justice element also. I think if we are not in a very heated debate, but back to normal times, what I desperately hope for, then we can come across this message. And definitely for financing, we need it.
Harjeet, do you also want to say something?
No, absolutely. I think we need a combination. We need a core public finance as grants, and then we also need innovative sources, because that also helps in making it predictable, and which is extremely important because you know the economics around it and it's easy to figure out. And I would list, of course, we talked about wealth tax. I would also list, and as Sabina was saying, financial transaction tax. There's also a discussion that we need to have about redistribution of public military spending. And I know it gets really sensitive, but we need to start looking at where the military expenditure is going and how much, which is also linked to emissions. And of course, fossil fuel subsidies and putting a levy.
Sure. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Aftab Alam Khan. I'm a multi-country researcher, and I had the pleasure to work with Harjeet in his previous job. Some of the recently conducted research, it showed that poor countries in the global south are not only facing the climate change impact, but multiple crises, including rising inflation, debt crisis, and others. What I have studied in an ActionAid International research, that the climate resilient agriculture is a solution not only for the climate challenges, but also rising inflation, because those farmers who were practicing climate resilient agriculture and agroecology, they were relatively better off facing both climate crisis and the rising inflation. My question is that a tiny part of the global finances go to climate resilient agriculture. How would Germany support NCQG negotiations? But also, Germany is a major international development partner. As part of its own development finance, how would Germany increase finances for climate resilient agriculture, given that Germany has a lot of success in reducing its greenhouse emission through agriculture? In agriculture, I think around 24% from 1990 onward, which is a great success. So how would you continue or push forward that support for greater finances for agroecology and climate resilient agriculture?
Thank you very much. I think a very important area, and I think the G20 summit also highlighted how unacceptable it is that the number of hungry people, malnourished people is rising, and that we have not solved it, and at the same time knowing that the problem will increase due to climate change. So really important point. So I think we, on the one hand, we are a bit in our bilateral cooperation very directly linked to what partners want. So we negotiate with countries and say, okay, where do you want us to focus our cooperation on? And we don't have as many partner countries asking for cooperation in agriculture as we had before. So this is really also demand driven. And at the same time, I personally and the colleagues I'm working with, as I have worked in this area before, I don't think that any agriculture project that is not taking into account climate change is a good program. So internally we are doing a lot of mainstreaming to make every program climate smart. A colleague said here at the beginning of the COP, there is no climate stupid agriculture, or there shouldn't be any climate stupid agriculture. So a very important point.
You want to add?
And I'm also aware of Germany supporting many organic farming initiatives. But I would also say that many of your big companies agrochemical companies are responsible for a lot of industrial agriculture, companies like BASF and Bayer. I think that also needs, because governments can do things on their own, but then how governments are going to regulate their own companies who are making such investments in the global south, I think that also needs to happen. Because we do hear that argument again from France, that they don't use fossil fuels as much, but look at their companies are causing havoc in Africa. So I think governments have a dual role. What you do directly, and how do you regulate your companies as well, because those have a huge impact in the global south.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you. That is an important point, and thanks for also highlighting the organic farming. In India, we have agroecology as a key element. I mean, we do the regulations in the EU, and I may say so that for us it's important what was decided also in the EU. So the discussion about glyphosate and the very difficult decision making on that then directly impacted because we want to behave or cooperate in other countries on the basis that we do in our own country. So any openness in the European context that brings the same then, the same consequence also from what we are doing outside Europe.
Thank you so much. Now we have the, okay, yeah. Yeah, I saw Jan, but first, yeah.
Yes, thank you. My name is Thomas from the German Institute for Development Evaluation. And my question goes back to what Heike Henn said very early on about the sequence of the negotiations in the NCQG, and that there are some very important questions that need to be solved before we talk about numbers. And I want to add one point to that. That's the transparency of reporting and the precision of definitions. Because when we looked in our evaluation on basically the single project that are reported as climate finance, we have some doubts that all of them are really reported to an extent that they should count as valid climate finance. So I think that has two implications. The first is only a goal that's credible, that's precisely defined and transparently reported is a credible commitment that is more likely to be upheld because non-compliance can easily be detected. And as an evaluator, there's also a second-order consequence, so to say, for our work, because we often are asked as researchers what really works and what policies work. And for that, it's extremely important to have precise data. And I think we can suspect that there's some systematic error in the data. So to learn about what really works, and to get credible commitments, the transparency is important. So my question is, to what extent is this found in the current negotiations and discussed? Thank you.
Who wants to answer?
Yeah, I mean the transparency and the comparability due to adhering to similar standards and also being able to explain one's impact. I mean, these are key cornerstones because, I mean, as I said in the beginning, finance is not impact as such. It's only what we do with finance. So this is important. This is also important contribute from different angles. Also, when we speak to what is already happening as South-South cooperation, so to make transparent where are financial flows and do they adhere to the same standard and make it comparable and visible can also be part of a joint solution on the contributor base or be, at least helpful. But I think I have really two hearts in my... Do you say that in English? No, I guess not. So I'm a bit torn. On the one hand, scientifically, I see, yes, let's do more work on the reporting and this and that, and OECD is not accepted. And on the other hand, I don't want to waste more time on nitty-gritty, not that I don't think it's important, but waste time on things that will not bring fast and fair change for vulnerable people and countries on the ground. So where to spend our scarce resources and time, the capacity in many developing countries on, this is where I'm torn at.
Yeah, I agree. It's about finding the right balance. and we need transparency and accountability at all levels. And I, coming from developing country, I can say things that may not be right. On one hand, we would like OECD to be far more transparent in the funding that they are providing. The reports from Reuters said that even the ice cream parlor costs were included in that funding, and many of the projects which were nowhere related to climate. So there's a Reuters exposure report, which raises big questions on the way money is coming. And then, of course, we also have issues how money is spent. And that's where I urge my developing country governments and civil society organizations to make sure that you get involved and every single penny is spent well. And I have no hesitation in holding my own governments and our friends in other developing countries to account. And that's where we need to make sure that part of the money goes in strengthening the civil society so that they can play that watchdog role, so that money is spent well, they are involved at all the stages. I also want to briefly respond to the contributors' point, in which I should have done earlier, which Heike said the world has changed. Well, I don't think the world has changed a lot. Yes, there are a handful of countries who have grown, and what we don't recognize is, one, they have grown on their own, which is never celebrated. You know, be it South Africa, from where it started, with all the history of colonialism and apartheid, or talk about Malaysia, talk about India, talk about Indonesia, talk about even China. Nobody went and helped China. I know China is a punching bag all the time. But the reality is that those developing countries have grown on their own. And now they followed the same model which the West promoted. And now they are being blamed for their emissions. And the crisis that we are facing is not created by the last 30 years of emissions, but 150 years of emissions. So the current crisis is not because of them. Yes, they are going to be responsible for adding fuel to the fire, but they did not start the fire. So that's number one. Second, rich countries have not yet paid their fair share, and you ask others to join. I think there's a huge problem. Look at the US, look at Europe. You have not paid your fair share. And the third is sequencing. You first pay your fair share, and then you say, we have done our best. We still have a gap because climate crisis is really intense now. You also pay. Makes sense. Then if it is China next, Gulf countries next, India next, Singapore next, it's fine. Nepal next, it's fine. Apply the equity formula. But where is the money that we have already received from rich countries for that 150 years of emissions? That's not there.
See that you are having some questions.
Yeah, just let me highlight that I also said that I think there's agreement in this COP that on Paris Agreement 9.1, developed countries should continue to lead. So that doesn't get forgotten that I said this. But speaking as a country that gets confirmation like annually from different civil society or think tanks that we pay even more than our fair share, I say in brackets, unfortunately, because our finance minister always listens to those kind of reports and says, look, you already pay your fair share. I think, speaking for Germany, I might also then say, look at other countries as well to contribute. And nobody ever at COP, at pre-COP, the last 2 or 3 years, no report that I know of from ODI, CDG, you name it, spoke about LDCs, spoke about 100 countries, about Nepal to contribute. It's really linked to economic capacity, basically, and emissions, and it's really a small number of countries.
No, I'm not. The reason I said Nepal was just to give an example that if you apply equity lens, then whoever is next, that's the point I was trying to make. I'm sure Jan will be in a better position to talk about fair share.
Let us invite Jan Kowalczyk.
Yeah, thanks very much. That's a good trigger.
From Oxfam.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Jan Kowalczyk, working for Oxfam in Germany. So we also meet every now and then in Berlin, for instance. On this fair share, we need to, of course, this is not my main point, but I have to comment on this. Germany does its fair share on the 100 billion. I think we can agree on that. Depending on different metrics, you more or less get to that result. But we are talking, of course, about the fair share of what is needed. And the 100 billion is obviously not even close to what is needed. So I totally recognize Germany being a big player, and it's good that it worked. Germany today made another announcement to the adaptation fund, and this is a small, but of course an important step. So yes, this is happening, but fair share, in our view, is always about comparing to the needs that we have. And these are much bigger than 100 billion. Now, my main comment was going back to the NCQG, when we talk about the quantum. So there's a media story that the European Union is looking at 200 to 300 billion as this core element of the goal. And I recognize you will not be able to confirm that because it's not officially tabled, I think. But I think it's no secret that developed countries, the numbers they are playing with will not amount to the amounts that the literature shows us that are needed and that Harjeet alluded to. The Climate Action Network is asking for this core, A, to focus on the core, and B, to make sure that this core has at least $1 trillion in it. And developing countries are asking for even more, 1.3 trillion. And of course, I know that a country like Germany and other developed countries will not be able to simply increase the amount of climate finance by a factor of 10 between now and tomorrow. I recognize that. So my question is, where is the vision forward, how we can increase ambition with regard to the quantum in the NCQG, if the numbers that I keep hearing about at closer look a bit suspiciously like continuing business as usual. And the 200 to 300 billion is a bit like that because this is compensating for inflation in some parts. Maybe the European Union has in mind to expand accounting to include all MDB finance, not only that is attributable to developed countries. Maybe the European Union or developed countries are looking into capturing other south-south flows in the big number they want to, or the number they want to table. But there's no actual visionary and substantial increase in the provision of finance from developed to developing countries that I have the fear is baked into this number. And I wonder, why can we not think big and say, the needs are clear. We need $1 trillion a year for developing countries. And we have to deliver this step by step to increase amounts from developed countries, increase amounts, concessional finance from the MDBs, but we also need to become much more serious about tapping into new sources that we don't have yet. The G20 gave us a bit of an idea what is possible, and other sources Sabine spoke about earlier, she's gone now, but anyway, so that this COP can not only capture something that looks a bit like business as usual, but goes way beyond that and increases the ambition and says, okay, we don't know exactly how we're going to deliver that, but here's a menu of options we are serious about exploring, inviting the different bodies and institutions to take them forward, like the MDBs, the G20 on the billionaires tax, for instance, and the IMO on shipping levies, and all these kind of things, but go beyond just like trying to write the present into the future and more or less only compensating inflation.
So, a process. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think we even here agreed that the ideas floating around are not the solution or will not, even if we find a consensus, what I sincerely hope and everybody is working for, that will not be the solution for the long term. It will be one step that we are able to take now and find consensus on in a very difficult economic and political situation globally. So, and we shouldn't make it smaller or bigger than that. And what I certainly wish for, that we don't leave Baku and starting from the first day with an agreement on NCQG and just start the next day for the next 10 years onwards, questioning, are we already there? No, not on the first day. Is it enough? What will we do? Because I would rather see us focus on how we deliver whatever the number is coming out of Baku, on how we deliver impact, because there will be a bigger number than the 100 billion. I'm probably not allowed to say it, but I personally think there will be. So it will. But we know already countries are struggling, not the Brazil, but countries are struggling in tapping into the money that is lying in World Bank and GCF and GEF for them, or in our bilateral. So countries are struggling. And if we double the amount or whatever, not automatically it will be easier. Oh, twice the amount of money lying there for me. Now I can tap into it and make the best out of it for my population. So let's jointly work on how we can make it easier, how we can make it more targeted to the vulnerable countries and people, how we get it out of the door, because I think this will help climate and people, or other people and climate and planet. This will also speak to the taxpayers who need to be convinced, yes, I want to do more. I want the plan with innovative finance, but please let us find a good NCQG and then shake our hands and start working on delivering on it, on not questioning it.
But the difference is big between 200,000 to 200 billions and 5 trillions. That's the challenge. And
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the high-level expert group and their report or the latest summary that has a different not only number but structure. Maybe different numbers as the result we might see on Saturday, Friday, whatever. But we see it really as a combination of sources, and innovative sources, of course, as I said, need to be part of accelerating financing. And so we see the core and the investment goal, what we were not able to explain well in our conversations. We see this then with different layers delivering maybe almost $1 trillion, or I don't talk numbers, but just to explain, it's the core, public, private sector, and then what we need for investment and needs.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that is true. Yet we are in a situation that I'm afraid we will leave Baku with an NCQG where the core, I'm now only talking about the core, is not a lot more than business as usual, adjusted for inflation and changing the accounting methodology by including other flows in the number. And it's not even close to meeting the needs of developing countries. This seems to be at least on the table, that we have that possibility, and I would like to avoid that. And you are right, of course, also developing countries need to grow their institutional capacity to program that money. Yes, of course they do that, but I'm convinced they could grow much quicker than what's currently possible. I know that the Adaptation Fund has a project pipeline many times bigger than what the pledges are that go into the fund. The Green Climate Fund has the same situation. Probably the Loss and Damage Fund will quickly evolve into that situation as well. So I don't think the developed countries are at 116 billion at the moment because there's not enough demand on the other side, but because there's not enough provision from the contributor side. I mean, I'm happy to be proven wrong, in which case we know we need to invest way more into the capacities of developing countries. But while it's true that you can't increase finance 10 times between today and tomorrow, you need to do this gradually, that's totally clear. But the gradient, the increase can be way steeper than what we currently have.
I wanted to make a very similar point. So there is no reason why Adaptation Fund doesn't have sufficient resources, only 1/5 of what they have asked for, which is also very small, that's $300 million. You talked about capacity. LDCF was created to do exactly that, to develop capacity of least developed country funding countries. LDCF hardly has any money, and we are hearing even Special Climate Change Fund, which was created long ago, was also to support developing countries, including their capacity. There's a readiness program. So there are efforts being made, and I agree with you that we have capacity gap, but I don't think that is the big hindrance in in delivering money. So I think we need both. We need to scale up money. At the same time, we need to invest in building capacity. That has to go hand in hand.
Thank you so much. And I have another person who wants to ask a question or make a statement. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Edwin Abuno. I'm working with Community Technology Development Trust from Zambia. Of course, we've got some support from Bread for the World and even Oxfam Novib and also Voices for Just Climate Change. I think I'm basically going to make a comment that yes, we need financial support to go towards climate solutions, but I think what needs to be highlighted is that financial support really should go towards, climate mitigation and adaptation, and with a focus on nature-based solutions, solutions that are going to be adapted, that are going to be domesticated by the locals specifically, solutions that are localized, that are coming from the grassroots, because that, of course, will assure sustainability. Solutions such as, I think, championing indigenous seeds, for example. And I think that's something that, we have seen, from the drought that, developing countries have experienced, that indigenous seeds have really, done very well. And so support going towards that is really very critical. Support in terms of research, for example. Well, in Zambia, for example, we have worked with Zambia Research Institute, Agricultural Research Institute, ZARI, with breeders that are able to help work with the people, small-scale farmers, able to tap into the indigenous knowledge, into their traditional knowledge, and factor that into their breeding system, so that whatever is produced is something that speaks to the environment of the small-scale farmers. Initiatives like maybe community seed banks, for example, initiatives like what you mentioned, organic farming, agroecology, something that promotes solutions within the reach of the farmers. Maybe the question just that I can bring to the German government is maybe because one thing that has again come up as a challenge to, especially in farmer-managed seed system, is the policy environment at national level, okay? Where maybe the policy environment does not motivate the production of indigenous seeds, but motivates the production of hybrid seeds, which at the end of the day does not speak as a solution to climate change. So maybe also at some point where maybe the donors or the German support is looking at how knowledge can be shared in terms of success stories on frameworks that promotes the production of indigenous seeds and farmer-managed seed system. Thank you.
You're
Very
nodding.
important points that we try also to incorporate in what we are doing, but maybe not enough. But really, I can fully agree with what you shared. Thank you for doing so.
Yeah, likewise, and also to mention, I'm sure you are very well aware about locally led adaptation that we all support. We are also having that conversation in the Loss and Damage Fund, how we can draw those lessons and ensure community access, not only through a separate program or a window, but all the money that goes where local community has a fundamental role in designing interventions and being part of it, and also monitoring and evaluation, definitely.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who has a question or wants to comment on the NCQG? Or are you all happy? You have the chance here to discuss with the representative of the German government and with the representative of an NGO. Yes, please. Welcome.
Yeah. Good evening. It is my great honor to be here. So I am the executive director from Vietnamese NGOs. And we have accreditations to the UNFCCC. So this is my 5th COP. And so SAD is a Vietnamese NGO, and we work across 20 provinces, and mainly with the small producers. for example, about 1 million timber producers and also nearly 1 million coffee producers. And you know that Vietnam coffee export to Europe a lot. So 1/3 of our coffee share to export to Europe. And Vietnam ranked the second biggest coffee producer in the world, only after Brazil. Having said that, I want to focus on the small producers. That this morning, I also share in the one of the panel organized by UNDP saying that I think the importance, we often work with community with the 3 L, low cost, low carbon, and low conflicts. That is very important. So I agree with you that money is important, but not very important. The important thing is how you can mobilize the communities, their knowledge, their resources. So we are now not identify problems, but we identify their assets and their strengths, so that they make their assets and their strengths become resources for the resilience of the communities. So it is important that everything you work with them come from nature-based solution as colleagues, and ecology-based solutions. That doesn't cost much, but it needs enthusiasm. It needs communities in solidarities. So that is the NGOs like us really make a big bridge between the government, UN, and also the communities. So we know that because we work in 20 provinces with many farmers, and they are suffering from climate change impacts. So we, on the one hand, we mobilize funding from donors like Bread for the World and Sodi from Germany. But on the other hand, we mobilize funding from private sectors in Vietnam, so that they can support the supply chain. For example, sustainable coffee platform, organic streams supply chain, so that they can we can work together, the local governments, the donors, and NGOs. We can support really the importance of the community and small producers. That is what I really want to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So do you want to comment on it?
I totally agree that when you work at the community level, you have to look at communities' capacities, and they have a lot of resources and their own traditional knowledge, and we need to definitely take that into account, but also recognizing that we are reaching a point where, because of climate change and the way things are changing fast, not all the traditional knowledge is going to be useful. So we need to bring modern science and looking at scenarios and traditional knowledge. I think that blend of traditional knowledge and modern science is going to be extremely important. And we do need resources. When we talk about large infrastructure, when we talk about early warning systems, for that we definitely need resources. But I agree, at the community level, when you involve community, you actually end up spending less because everybody is so engaged, they're contributing their own local resources and wisdom.
Thank you so much for sharing. I very much agree with Harjeet that how you explained it, when the community is so engaged and committed, then the resources can be, the still needed resources, are then be used in a very efficient and impactful way. And so that sounds really great, and engaging also private sector in the value chain in a just and fair way. If this works, brings then additional finance. But it's starting with the community was really a great example. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much. Now we have the last person who will ask a question, because we come to the end of our discussion. Thank you very much for answering all these questions. It's really interesting.
No, thank you very much. My name is Henry Chiwotu. I'm coming from Zambia, the executive director there, working with Scope Zambia. And one of our partners here, donors, is here, Bread for the World. And just want to, I think for me it's a appreciation and a comment, so it won't really be a question, I'll spare you. But yeah, firstly, I would like to appreciate the work that the German government is doing in the Global South, in particular in Zambia. Back home, we're working with schools and colleges, and we're promoting climate education with regards to the issues of laws and adaptation and mitigation, which is a very important program, and also feeding into the school feeding programs back home. And as far as the committee is concerned, I would love to agree with the speakers, especially on the aspect of having a facility that is tailored to the Global South. When you talk about issues of private sector being the ones to lead the discussion rather than the civil society or public finance, I think the conversation should be about public finance and the civil society, because our needs are really different. We are at a stage where we're developing our nations, and we can't leave everything with private sector to lead the conversation, because their goal is really profit. And issues to do with capacity building, with digital tools to track all the NQSGs, you need the public finance and the civil society to take the leading role. And lastly, is something which I find quite heartbreaking for myself, because when you speak to the private sector, when you speak to the different donors in our space, they're talking about what's your business case if we're going to invest in this loss and damage or adaptability that you're doing. But when you look at the work that we're doing as civil society, as our Scope Zambia, is to do with how can we provide food to the communities? How can we ensure that the peoples are able to rise up with all these climate challenges that they are facing? And if you're looking for a balance sheet, profit and loss statement, you won't find it. But let us look at, like my colleague said from Zambia, Bueno, that let us look at issues to do with how can we preserve the local seeds, indigenous knowledge. How can we look at landscape, integration of landscape resilience at the landscape level. Some of those interventions, I think if we go that route and have a jacket that fits the Global South rather than an all size fit all, it will really help us. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just agree with you.
Okay, so thank you very much for your comment. It seems that everybody is agreeing on the panel that this is right what you are saying. So thank you very much. So I just have the final question to the two of you. What gives you hope that we get the results that you are expecting? What gives you hope?
Actually, all the people here in Baku, the stories are heard here, but also in the negotiation rooms. I mean, we are struggling, 99% of the people engaging are struggling from a good faith, good heart, and want to see progress. And most of us have also understood how severe the situation is, the urgency and the need to act. And so, speaking to my now already old colleague, Harjeet, for we have spent such an intense year in the Transitional Committee, Loss and Damage, and having really an open and fair, transparent discussion, and also with the other speakers. I mean, this is what we need to have. To agree where we to see where we disagree, find common ground, and that is what happens here in Baku and will happen at the end of this COP.
I'm hopeful, but I'm cautiously hopeful, because what has not happened in the last 10 days and the last 3 years, because we are talking about NCQG now for the last 3 years. But what makes me hopeful is at least people know what the priorities are. The demands or needs are in trillions that everybody is aware of, and I totally agree with Heike. It's just about now showing that political will and really talking about what is needed to be done and not what we can do. And as you said, need is massive, and that that feeling and that commitment now needs to be shown by all the leaders. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heike, Henn, and thank you so much, Harjeet Singh, for the discussion. But thank you so much for all your questions and contributions. I think it was a very good and lively discussion. You contributed to it. Thank you very much to Lisa Badum for the opening remarks. And I'm looking forward to the end of the week, as for me, the glass is always half full. I'm really sure that something good will happen. So thank you.
Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.